And welcome back. We have with us Senator Mark Lizarraga, who is representative for the private sector in the Senate. And good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Both of you. Thanks so much for having me here again.
We're happy to have you this morning. The budget debate is something that is probably the most important House meeting, because that's the purpose of government, to determine how funds are distributed. I'd like for you to just set a backdrop as to how this process works in terms of what is the underlying themes that, in an academic sense, set the stage for the budget.
Okay, I'll start it off in this way. Somebody tell me that we've given the right to a bunch of people to dip into our pockets, right? Mm-hmm. And to spend on our behalf, for our betterment, for our good. And I like that, because that's in effect what we're doing. Yeah. We've given power to a bunch of people to dip their hands into our finances and hopefully invest them with a plan, with a strategy. We have had several strategies for the development of this country. We have had the Growth and Sustainable Development Strategy, which had a lifespan from 2016 to 2019. So we should be reflecting on that strategy. And that strategy was building on to what we have as the Horizon 2030 framework, okay? And there you can see it, where we've identified certain pillars, right? In this vision we have for national development, we've identified pillars about democratic governance and about education for development. Two powerful statements, huh? And then we have core values, guiding principles, and we have what we call the bricks and mortar, which are a healthy environment and a healthy people. And we identified targets. And what the budget seeks to do, or should seek to do, is to put money, allocate resources, identify goals for us to attain these targets. And if you read the documents, they're beautifully written. They've identified, that we need democratic governance for effective public administration and sustainable development. What a mouthful, eh? Isn't that beautiful? Huh? Education for development, education for life. And we can begin to look at these things and think about how effective we've been in these areas. Because we've been proceeding along this, what you call program budgeting, which seeks to align these goals with the ministry's objectives in a measurable way, so that at the end of the year you can pick up this document, go to any ministry, look at its vision, and it should be aligned with these strategies, and look at the things that they're going to accomplish in a measurable way, and they should report at the end of the year what they have achieved in trying to attain these goals in a measurable way. They should give you numbers. This was our target, this is what we did with the money, right? So when we look at these, we begin to really question how serious we are about transparency and accountability. For example, when you look at the core values, right? The authors of this document, a document which the government embraced, by the way, and set as its strategy, recognizes that transparency and accountability and people's participation are key elements in a successful democracy. Yeah, I never make this up. It's the government came out with this position. You talk about strong families are needed as well. What are we doing to make our families stronger? People participation. This is a big thing right now. If you go to all the forums internationally that we attend to, and conventions that we sign on to, declarations that we sign on to, they talk more and more about people participation and about good governance. and the reasons why good governance are important. And there's an economic connect. Because when you have people participation and practice good governance principles, you're more effective in the delivery of services to your people. Corruption has a tremendous cost on service delivery to your people. Why is the business community interested in all of this? Because we want to be competitive, and these things as well affect our competitivity. We want to have our people raise the standards of living. Only some people should benefit from this so-called exercise in democracy that we practice, where we spend $1.359 billion, $1,359 million from our pockets. So,
if I could put it in a context, kind of put it in a layman's term, this, and put it in a business term as well.
Sure.
The documents that you're reading from are the equivalent of like maybe a house plan. So this is what you look at to say, this is how I build my house. For 5 walls, I want it for 5 people in the family. Or if it's like not like a house plan, then it's kind of like a business plan if you're a business person. This is the set of your business. Is that an appropriate comparison?
It's precisely that. It's the government is saying, look, we need better education. We need to raise the standard of our people. One of the big goals is to remove people from poverty, right? If you look at the United Nations Development Goals, so number 1, remove people from poverty. And our targets and goals as well recognize this, and they recognize that the way to do this is to stir economic activity, to get a vibrant economy, private sector driven, okay? Because that's the only real source of sustainable creation of wealth. The government cannot continue to borrow and spend and expect to do that into perpetuity. Otherwise, we end up where we are today. But yes, the short answer is it's a plan that we have embraced as a country with short, medium, and long-term goals.
I appreciate that you use this kind of as the backdrop for this conversation, because we do need to remember some of the commitments we have made as a country to ourselves and also internationally.
Yes.
When you think of things like the Sustainable Development Goals, when you think of the Horizon 2030 plan, as you spoke of just now, or you even think of a recent signing of the UNCAC, all of these things are excellent examples of a commitment to improving the individual life of every single Belizean in this country, by doing things in a way that would seem transparent and fair and elevate your livelihood, essentially, if I could summarize it that way. My question to you is, how much of our action plan, so we set out the overall mission that we want to accomplish, we sign on to these documents, we commit ourselves to these things, how much of our financing is contributing to these very great goals that we've agreed we want?
Let me answer you this way. On the UN website, there is something here called the main challenges encountered and areas of progress. And it said the main challenges to date are political adoption of the Sustainable Development Goal agenda has not been fully embraced at all levels and sectors required to move the process effectively. So where is the will? We say we want to do it because it sounds nice. We have a development agenda, we go to the international community and we say we're doing all these things. We make all these commitments. But the same document is saying we don't have the political will to adopt. There it is. And secondly, and what reveals itself very well in the budget, in a negative way, is that we don't have the existing processes for data collection and interpretation. It speaks about our ability to measure and deliver in data what it is that we want to achieve and how much we've achieved. So there are two things. I want to stress these points because they're very noticeably lacking in the budget. Is the will to do it, and by will I mean financial will too. And the ability to identify. You've had this beautiful opening document, but how do we identify how we are going to deliver these services to get to those goals in a way that you and I can look at it and say, okay, we wanted to get to 10, now we're only at 6.
So
next year I need more money, or I need more people, or I need whatever, more equipment, supplies, you understand?
Yes.
And those are the big things that are missing.
But to be fair, the Horizon 2030 plan or the Sustainable Development Goals, these are long-term programs. They're over. The Millennium Development Goals was 15 years. The SDGs are also 15. But so my question is, it takes time. It's a slow rollout sometimes to be able to achieve these goals, and it's incremental actions that have to be taken. So whether it's the Boost program, for example, or some of the educational grants that are taking place, which we have seen implemented before, are these not perhaps smaller strategies to reach the overall goal?
I said when I started my budget presentation in the Senate, I said, there's none so bad that you can't find some good, and there's none so good that you can't find some bad. Okay. I'm not here in a short period of time, as I said this in the Senate, to promote the goods. But you're absolutely right. There are ministries that are trying. There are people in the public service that genuinely want to make a difference. And I want to thank those members of the public service that take their time to call me, to point me in the right direction, and to say, take a look at that. Because obviously I'm not an expert at all of this, but you get help. Yeah. So we do have good people. But let me come back to my point. The point I wanted to make was that, yes, there are few things that we have done. Not enough, in my viewpoint. Why? I think if we look dispassionately at the Sustainable Development Goals set for 2016 to 2019, these are things we should have achieved just in 3 years. We fall way short. Now, talk about the 2030 goals. We're halfway there. We signed this document in 2010. So we have to take a look and say, how much have we achieved in 2010? And we are now, I've been in the Senate, I think this is my 7th or 8th budget I'm looking at. And I came down very hard. Some say perhaps a little too hard. I don't think so. A lot of people think not hard enough. On the CEOs and what we refer to as the accounting officers. Because when I look at this budget and the mistakes, the omissions, they call them accounting officers. That's the proper term, right? All these accounting officers. In some ministries, CEOs are accounting officers. In others, you have administrative officers, etc., etc. But they're all accounting officers. They're the people that the law authorizes to spend from this book. They're responsible. And things that I repeat every year, they're not full-in information. The basic information. They can't tell you the amount of schools when they have, man. They can't tell you the amount of people where they drop out of school. I mean, I'm just throwing these out as examples.
And I wanted to get to that because I think we can talk about the budget, but not in isolation, because a part of looking at how you're spending your money is also, and I think that's what you're getting at, is measuring that you are on the right path. One of the important measurements, it's our social indicators. It's looking at things like poverty rate. How are people, what is our current poverty rate? What is our unemployment rate? What are we looking at? Some of the health indicators are so critical as well in understanding how we are doing as a country. Can we talk about whether or not that information has been put forward and how helpful it is in us understanding if we are moving in the right path and how we're spending our money?
Well, again, that document from the UN spoke to our need to improve on data collection and reporting. For example, what you mentioned about unemployment. A lot of people question whether those numbers are in fact real, because if you are engaged in some sort of employment activity for a few hours a week, and I'm not sure what the numbers are, you're counted as employed. If you are not seeking a job, you know, show up in that report. My big thing is that we have...
So the unemployment rate that was presented for this budget is 9.4%.
Right. Still means we have about 16,000 people, I believe, in the country that officially we say do not have jobs. One simple way, another way of looking at it is we have about 11,000 kids coming out of school every year. Where do we see employment for these 11,000 kids? And how many of them hit the formal sector, let's say? And how many of them have to go into an informal sector? How many people your lead this morning about the halakte and people going across the border, and I read something from a sociologist. He say when people are struggling, they don't understand the concept of contraband and anything. Then they look for a way to survive. You understand me? So we have to make sure that this book works for all these people, right? And yes, you know, they say there's statistics and then lies or damn lies. Numbers, you have to be able to interpret them, and you have to.
But you also have to know the measuring tools that are
used.
Right.
That's
the key to any number
right.
that's put out. Because I don't know how many people would feel that an unemployment rate of 9.4 is accurate for the country. But I am only exposed to Belize City. I don't know what's the reality on the ground everywhere else. I wanted to ask though specifically about the poverty rate.
Well, we haven't had a poverty rate new number in, I think, almost 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that one is promised, but absolutely your point is right on key. Because we know that even prior to this government, we had seen borrowing and spending on the rise. And yet, at the same time, poverty kept going up. So there was a disconnect between the spending and the poor people. The poor people, it appeared, weren't benefiting from the spending. So
don't mind my interruptions.
No,
I just want to make sure that we're delivering it in a way that people understand. So when you say that there's borrowing, we're borrowing money, usually that we have to pay back with some interest rate, to spend for programs for the people, but it's not translating in an improvement of the livelihoods of the individual because our poverty rate was growing.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
That's what the numbers were saying.
And the last number was 43%?
43%, yeah.
Population for.
So
there is a census and the household survey, I think, of recent.
We'll
find out soon.
Let me give you a classic example, and it's somewhat of a controversial example, perhaps. We are spending for a new road right now, or we're about to spend for a new road from mile 8 to the airport. $30 million plus or whatever. Okay? If you wanted to have your spending a priority for lifting people or improving the impact that this has on people, couldn't we have best spent that money on roads for the cane farmers, for example? Because you know that the cane industry is important in our economy. It's a major source of foreign exchange for the country. And we know that their margins have been shrinking because of the trade agreements and because of the prices in the world market, etc. And we know that transportation is a very expensive part of their production costs. So why not give them good roads so that they can lower their cost in delivering this product to market? This is one of the major foreign exchange owners in this country. Just an example. How was spending on an airport road from mile 8? How many people from mile 8 go to the airport? What was the justification?
Well, can I ask you, because we know that one of the greatest revenue earner, the biggest source of our money right now that's coming in, it's like your biggest job. is tourism.
Yes.
And so it's perhaps connecting tourists from the airport directly into the western corridor.
But that's why we have the Hattieville bypass. That's why we have that whole triangle already. We already have a loop. I'm just saying, we need to be able to analyze these things. If what we say is we want to raise the standard of living and we want to take people out of poverty.
Can I ask a procedural point there? I'm actually going backwards. If you
Sure,
don't
that's
mind.
fine.
You've pointed out these errors because this is an important document, as you've
Yes.
been telling
Very
the public, and the accuracy of it is important. You've told us that year after year you've been telling them, listen, basic things we don't do. We're gonna miss out this not correct here, and every year you're seeing the same error. My question is, do you think that we should import a procedural step to allow for the parliamentarians, the senators and the members of the House, to be able to look at the budget beforehand and to share your views so that you don't come, not even public, it's not even like public consultation, just simply, this is the budget I'm going to put, good senator, tell us all the mistakes we have in it and we'll fix it before reaching it, so when we get there, we're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about the essence of policy. We're looking at measurement of the MGN goals, of the SDG goals, etc., etc. Are we missing a procedural step? So we don't have grandstanding in terms of, for those people who are doing political mischief to be able to come and say, blah, blah.
I couldn't agree with you more. And thank you for bringing it up because it was something I wanted to bring up as well. This budget was another no consultation budget.
Wow.
We've had consultation before. I believe we had consultations, was it the year before?
I think it may have been 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, maybe less, but anyhow, 2 years ago, whatever. Where we sat down and did precisely this. And we said, look, I think it was the time when I'm bringing some new tax on fuel when he wanted to raise $50 million from fuel, remember? We said, okay, if we are going to be making sacrifices and you're going to be asking us to pay more through this fuel tax, then you show us that you're serious, man. Cut expenses by 5%. Ask some of the entities that we own as a people to contribute to the budget. There was a law that passed and they said they contribute 10%. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen government cut its expenses. As a matter of fact, the expenses have gone up by some $40 million.
There was the cost-saving report that had come out as a result of that I believe it was a result of that consultation. So, I don't know how much of it has been implemented. But who does the follow-up? I mean, if we spend the time to invest in going through where we can make cuts, everybody has a budget, whether on paper or not. You know the light bill they got to high, you start cut off the light leave it, you know? We all make little sacrifices if we want to, it's survival. But who does the follow-up on these things?
Unfortunately, just about the only time we get to debate this is once a year. I mean, and on shows like this, we're grateful for the opportunity. And then we're limited to 1 hour maximum in a debate. When the president of the Senate told me that my time was up, 45 minutes, I had only reached page 18 of this book. I was just warming up.
It might happen here too if we don't get into it. So
bring us back.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the major points of the budget. And where I would like to start, and perhaps you have an idea in mind, but we know where the investment, we've heard clearly that it's more of an infrastructure budget than anything else. It's spending on roads and bridges. But I really want to move into some of the people-centered aspects of the budget to understand whether or not we are investing in improving their lives. Education and health, for example, national security when we're talking about crime. How are we faring off in terms of the investment and expenditures as well, if you're looking back, in these areas?
Well, they claim, they give lip service to these pro-poor as policies as being uncompromising. We won't compromise these policies, but if you look at what they actually put towards the poor programs, it's dismal.
How much?
You'd ask me for quote specific
numbers?
Numbers.
Okay. Then we can measure it against the $30 million road. Then it's a realistic number.
Okay, sure. If you look, let me find it as we speak. If you look at Ministry of National Security, we saw in fact that a lot of the numbers for personal emoluments came down. So we were wondering if the police were going to be getting a pay cut. So these were some of the errors that we highlighted, things that, back to your point, that had we had consultations before, meaningful consultations, which you promised, by the way, because you talk about open governance and people's participation. That's what it means, that we get to sit down with you before you put out these budgets, that we own this process as well, that we feel some ownership in this process. But let's look at...
you said national security.
No. I found the Ministry of Human Development,
Okay.
for example. Let's look at their allocation for poverty alleviation. Last budget year, they spent $732,000. This year, they're going to allocate $400,000.
Maybe it's been working. Maybe you don't need to spend that much again.
Well, maybe people are coming out of poverty. You would have to answer that. Marlene has a different view on the poverty numbers. Let's look at conscious youth. Not conscious youth, sorry. Let's look at the Restore Belize program. Last year, they budgeted $800,000. They spent $66,000, and this year they budgeted $0. So these numbers are in the book, page 179, right?
Could it be though that because government sets policy, and if it's like setting a grocery list. You say you're going vegan, and then you realize your kids aren't eating the food. So you decide, okay, I'm not going to spend on vegetables anymore. I'm going to go buy meat. Is it that they're simply moving it around and saying, okay, this policy has not worked, and so I'm going to put the money somewhere else into another program where it will be giving more bang for your buck? I'm trying to find justifications for why.
We could speculate on anything, but it's not our job to speculate. Our job is to analyze what it is that you say you're going to achieve, what are your priorities, how you're going to spend them, and then measure it.
Well, one of the clear indicators for that would be whether or not the total sum is the same.
It's gone up.
But your job is to sell the program, and not just sell it in lip service. Give me the numbers. Tell me we had so many poor people, and now the poor gone down. We had so many hungry people, and now that is the job of this type of formatting, right? It says one of their
What was the response when you raised that issue?
Most of these things go unanswered. Let's look at social assistance and a CAP 3 for the same thing, right? Last year they budgeted $632,000. This year $0. So youth and community transformation project in 2018-2019 they budgeted $1 million. They spent $882,000. This year they're budgeting $700,000. So there's not an increase in the social programs that you say this budget is all about. It's lip. Now you look at how much money is going. Let's just look at the total sum now, right? They're spending $24 million, they claim, on these projects. But most of it goes to recurrent expenses. Running the office, paying the salaries. There's very little project money. There's no money here. Under Women's and Gender Services.
What does that mean, though, in practical terms? Does it mean that there will be no new programs? Does it mean that...
This is not a priority area for spending. We're spending on roads. We're spending on other things.
$24 million is the total budget for the year for human development.
Just to keep the offices open.
Let's look at rehabilitation services.
No, the total budget. The total budget.
The total budget for that ministry was $24 million.
Which is less than what the road costs.
Look at rehabilitation services. They budgeted $550,000 last year. They spent $467 this year, and budget $300,000. So, where are the programs? Where are the programs? The food, the pantry thing, right? Where before they had small allocations to the other districts, now they take the same amount, $3.5 million, and they spread it throughout the whole country. Maybe people are coming out of poverty, you're right, but I don't see the numbers to tell me that. I don't see the numbers. That's what this should be telling us. How many people were poor? Under what basis you assess them as being poor? And now so many people have come off the program because they're not poor anymore. Those are the types of measurement and indicators that we need to be able to
Before
have.
we go to break, can I ask this, because I know we are long overdue for a break. Can I ask whether or not it's too late to get those answers now, to be able to come back to the public and say, okay, well, I understand now why we cut the budget from here. Can we go to the Ministry of Human Development and say, answer these questions for me? The Minister probably couldn't answer it because he was strapped for time. Could you, as the CEO or the director or whoever it is that's responsible,
I think
give
you
us
should.
these answers?
I call out on citizens and the press. These things, $24 million in a few pages. And this is one small ministry. And it's an easy read.
Critical one.
It's a very critical one. And it is stated as one of our priorities when we look at our development goals, right? And it is stated as an important one for this government. As it should be. That's the purpose of borrowing and spending for your people, that for give them better health, better housing, better education, teach them to fish.
Well, Senator, I think you're heating up, so maybe it's a good time to take the break.
Yeah.
And we'll see you on the other side of this conversation. Stay tuned, he's just getting warm.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
And we're back, and we're continuing our conversation with Senator Mark Lizarraga. Of course, he's a senator for the private sector, and we are diving into the details of the budget. Senator, we closed off starting to look at the actual numbers. What is being proposed to be spent within the next upcoming financial year. We touched a bit on human development and the concerns that you had there. And I know the next area we wanted to look at was national security, right?
Well, I highlighted something, and this is why I have to go back and call out the CEOs and the accounting officers. I'll give you one example of what is so evident that's wrong. Here we have community police services and crime prevention. We have them increasing the numbers of employed persons from 1,239 to 1,712 people.
Okay.
Yet the allocations for personal emoluments, salaries, came down from 42 million to 38 million. So how you hire almost 500 people more and your salary is going down by 4 million? That just no makes sense. Are we going to be cutting the salaries of police officers? Does that make sense to you?
There must be some reasonable explanation.
I don't care what the explanation is. I know that they're cutting people's salary.
For example,
I'm sure this is a mistake. It's either a mistake in the bottom here, but then they project to have 1,700 people employed in this department next year. Kevin,
What
my
if
point
they-
is, I'm not
Numbers
here
don't
to
add up.
speculate, man.
I understand.
This is a law, you know.
I understand.
This is a law. It should be error-free.
I understand.
Right?
But my concern is that before I condemn it as an error, I want to hear the explanation for it. And it could possibly be, like I've had experience, you had a consultant in who took a major chunk.
Line.
Yeah, who took a major chunk of your budget. And you have already done the work with a consultant. So maybe you spent 100,000 on a consultant. That consultant is gone. I know you're hiring community workers, for example, to collect data. So you might hire 100 people more, but the salary for those 100 people is not even 1/10.
I'm not here
what
to
you spent on
speculate,
the
and you can
consultant.
speculate as long as you like. My job is to look at the numbers that we pass into law. There's another ministry where from 39 to 47, a National Police Training Academy. Sorry, let me state first what they had last year. Last year we had 173 people at the National Police Training Academy. This year, you know how many people we'll have there? 39. 39 people. Is it that our police officers are so well trained? We no need for trained with police officers?
So who are the people
Could
who are
it be
fired?
a shift from full-time to part-time? Is that also
I don't
accommodated?
know what
for-
it can be, but
so what you're
that is
saying
not
is
my
you see
job.
this major drop
Yes.
in numbers and we don't know why.
Exactly. And when we used to spend 900,000 on 173 people,
Yeah.
we're still spending the 990,000 more on 39 people. Remember, I only have, first of all, I only have a few days to look at this book.
Yeah.
Second of all, I'm limited to 1 hour.
Yeah.
Right? So I just have to highlight what
of
I
them.
see.
I know Kevin has one to highlight as well in terms of investigation,
Yeah.
intelligence gathering.
Yeah. One of the things that
I have one more while you're looking for that, Kevin. Look on the police strategic management and administration. Last budget year, they had 133 people. This budget year, we have 65 people. Yet the allocations for salaries for personal emoluments went up by a little less than 100,000. So here you had 133 people earning at 1.7 million. Now you have 65 people earning 1.8 million.
Okay,
So
but
in some areas you have this drastic, it look like pay cut, and in other areas you have this drastic pay rise. It don't make sense, right?
yes, Senator, I wanted you to comment on
And if there's a strategy shift, Marlene, let's say what.
well,
what-
I'm not even thinking of strategy shift. I'm thinking with that one, it could also be that people have gotten a raise.
Could be a million and one things. Then it is the responsibility of those in that ministry to say so when they go to the house and say, look, we are doing so and so. We are cutting in this area. We don't need enough people. We don't need so many people at the police training academy. We can do the same job with 37 than 173 used to do. We're raising the people's salary in strategic management, whatever.
Yeah.
That's why they have an opportunity to talk unlimited time in the house. Right? And they only have to report on a few pages. But yet they spend their time in there lashing back and forth across the aisle,
Instead of
talking
explaining
about
his
politics
numbers.
instead of talking about the ministries.
So I think the point on the intelligence gathering is really important as well in looking at what is budgeted for this year.
Yeah, when you look at page 209 of the budget, Senator, this is under Ministry of National Security, under the heading intelligence gathering, and you would think
No
that
money.
Nothing allocated for this
Nothing
year.
allocated on that
Nothing.
capital. Nothing.
zero.
Right?
And also when you look at training, because this is the brain of your police department, the police training and administration and strategic management.
That's right.
When you look at the training costs, it was at zero last year and has been increased this year to 3,800, and it is projected to decrease next year to $2,400. Like that's the cost of a plane ticket.
So where are our priorities? And
And we've been
like
hearing
those examples,
clamoring
Kevin, because of the time constraints, but
Yeah.
there are so many. And
Let me just clarify one thing for people who are viewing. So when we hear things like you were allotted, and I'll use simpler numbers, $100, but you only spent 50, and this year I'm budgeting for 0. it's not that remaining 50 is what I'm going to use. Just to clarify to people.
No,
right?
that's a good point. That's a very good point, Marlene. No.
When the financial year is finished, you no longer have access to that money.
Yeah.
Whether no matter what's left over. Which is why you have to budget a new cost so that can be allocated to you.
Yeah. Marlene, I want to raise some very important points for me.
Yeah.
We have a lot of public monies invested in a lot of private companies. The government owns institutions and they call them, help me here, Kevin, they call them, quasi-government institutions, right? Mm-hmm. And the big ones, of course, being, let's start with BTB, tourism. They collect 9% tax on all the accommodations, right? It's an accommodation tax, the hotels, etc. To this date, we have not seen a financial report from BTB. No.
Wow.
We still allocate $200,000 in the budget for grants to BTB, even though tourism is doing so well. Tourism has been contributing to the budget about $2 million a year, BTB. You know how much they gave us last year? $857,000, while it was budgeted that we would receive $2.1 million from them. This in a year when they are shouting and proclaiming, and you just said that tourism is one of the biggest pillars and it's growing and blah, blah. Then why would the BTB be delivering less than half of what it was budgeted for us to receive? Why? That's a valid question, I believe.
That you haven't gotten
That
an
I
answer
haven't
for.
gotten an answer for. Okay? Let's look at Protected Area Conservation Trust and PUC. Again, PACT manages a lot of the national parks. You would think that because of the tourism numbers going up, we'd be collecting more there. They were allocated that they would contribute to the budget $10 million. They contributed $1 million. 10% PUC and PAC. So where is the performance? Remember, they were going to start contributing more, right? Let's look now at transfers from the central bank. We just got the central bank reports for 2016, 2017. According to the central bank, they contributed to the general fund $6 million in 16, $6 million in 17. Yet when you look at 17 here, there's no money from the central bank. And while it's projected that we should have gotten $6 million last year, we only got $1 million.
So we were supposed to get, and we got $0?
That's what I'm seeing.
So the central bank report says
the central bank
that they
allocated
gave
financial
$6 million
to the general revenue fund.
But the budget report says
Right.
the contribution
And
was
there
zero.
are other ministries that have reported income in their reports that do not add up to what is reported here in the summary. For example, another one I raised, lottery. Remember they said that the reason we privatized lottery was we wasn't making any money off of it.
Yes.
And now the government, they're purporting in the House, they said is making $2 million a year off of it.
Yes.
Well, according to this, the amount of money we got from lottery was $324,000. Right? If you look at, again, there are other ministries, the Belize Broadcasting Authority reports a certain amount in here. You go to the page. And many of these. Right? So I don't want to chew up the time.
Yeah.
What I want to do, I want to stress my opening point is that these people, and this is why I came down hard on them, these people that are in charge of implementing, in charge of compiling, and the minister not compile their things, right? The CEOs and the accounting officers. They need to start doing their homework better, man. This is done, I don't know how many years we're into this. 8 years later and you can't get it right. We don't even start to talk about the quality of the targets and goals yet and the measurement mechanisms, how poorly they are. Ministry of Finance spend the most money in this. And if you look at their program indicators, etc., etc. They still don't have them listed. And they're the owners of this process. They still can't tell you what it is that they plan to achieve with the spending of that money. Ministry of Education, they still can't tell you how many schools they have, how many kids drop out.
I'm trying to, I think we're both stunned into silence at
Yes.
some of the things that you just pointed out. And I
Staggering.
understand why you bring them up because they're such a critical point. How in one official report will you say the money went in to the budget? And then in the budget report, not have it accounted for. My question is, Senator, you do have a lot of questions, and you're absolutely right. I am in no position or have no responsibility to give you the answers for the questions you're asking. But when we're speaking to the public and we leave unanswered questions, what can we say to them? Should people be going to their ministers and asking for these reports? Should we be perhaps more involved in the budget process from the first time? We had an even shorter time to be able to digest it before it was passed. But should we be paying more attention so that we can raise the red flags for these questions and say, hold up, before this budget gets passed?
All of the above and more. Everything you said and more. There's no one simple answer. But yes, generally speaking, we need to become involved because they are putting their hands in our pockets. Remember that we pay taxes, for this.
Yeah.
We pay taxes, right? Every time we buy a pound of anything in this country, we're paying taxes. Anytime then say cost of living they remain basically flatline. I don't know how the numbers come about, right? But if you ask any man and woman on the street if the cost of living has remained stable or gone up slightly, no. The answer is no. So we have an obligation, all of us, as civil society and as the press, we have an obligation to ask questions, to demand more. The answer is clearly already written. We have the answers already. We have the Vision 2030, where it talks about the pillars of good governance, people participation. We have, I need to make this plug, one last plug. Look at the Office of the Auditor General. Yeah. She was cut. Look at the Judiciary. Their budget was cut. Where are the priorities? The Ombudsman, one of the key players in oversight. We haven't had the Contractor General. We haven't had a Contractor General in over a year. We had 80 people apply for a job at BL, and we now have people apply for the contractor. We have talented people. And if we don't have the talented people here, advertise one in the Caribbean. You have the free movement of people, etc., etc. But we need to, that is an institution that was set up to protect us, to see that contracts are being. But even so, they only had 3 people in that man office, and he had to look at an average of 1 contract a day. So how can that office with one, even when it's fully functioning, with 1 contractor general, 1 administrative officer, a secretary, whatever, oversee these contracts for millions and millions of dollars? Come on, we're not serious. On book, on paper, we've done everything right. We have an integrity commission, we have an ombudsman, we have a public accounts committee that in name,
no money,
but in practice. Look at the public accounts committee. Look at the public accounts committee. They are the ones that should be looking at this. They're the ones that should be asking the questions, Marlene, and calling the ministers,
to get the
and
answers.
calling the CEOs to get the answers if they have questions in this. That is the job of the Public Accounts Committee. And then they come back to Parliament and say, you know what, so and so and so and so and so. Why has there been, even though there's been a promise to the business community and the teachers union when they went on strike, that we'd reactivate or recompose the Public Accounts Committee? Because that is the body that will look at the details of this and the mistakes. Thanks for bringing it down.
I'm sitting here getting a bit annoyed because I feel.
No, you know how I feel.
I'll tell you what I'm annoyed if you'll allow me, which is I feel the 2 days was almost a waste of time that they argued in the House that I spent time away from my work doing. Because for the ministers, For these errors to have passed, they should feel ashamed. If this passed through my ministry and I was a minister, I'd feel ashamed that the Senate had to point out that there's these glaring errors. And for the opposition to not have delved into some of these glaring errors in a more detailed way, and there are no limitations. You have a limitation of an hour in the Senate. The opposition
45 minutes. The
45
president
minutes.
can give you 15 minutes, and he graciously did.
But the opposition ought to have done a little better, a much better job. I mean, not be overly generous in deep delving into these numbers and putting each minister to task. Why is it that you are employing more people, less people, but the thing going up? My question is just, how do we get more bang for our buck rather than the grandstanding and the political speech? Because, you know, reading through the document, the Prime Minister's summary, it's beautiful language, man. This should be a novel.
Yeah. It makes us feel that all the infrastructure work is necessary too.
Yeah.
But I want to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but when you look at some of the things in there, because one of the things I wanted you to comment on is revenue is gotten from taxes. That's the way how government makes its money. That's the way they take out the money out of your pocket. That's the way they push you on.
And not just income tax, but everything we purchase.
Everything.
Yes.
But one of the things that is this budget is championed on is the fact that as
No new tax.
there are no new taxes. That must be good news.
Let me say this. Last year, I stand corrected. I think it was the end of 2017. So the impact would have been felt mostly in 2018. The government administratively began taxing 180 tariff lines. What do I mean by that? Yes. Items that were not attracting GST started paying GST. Over 180 tariff lines, not 180 items, 180 tariff lines. So all of that revenue, you felt the major impact. You never feel the impact of it in 2017, but you felt it in 2018. So taxes have gone up. I couldn't fool myself, right? The formula for fuel, governments take increases when the price go up. We don't get relief. And there are many other ways administratively they call it the watermelon, or they slice away, and administratively they've changed things. The regulations, they come and they pass on ESI or so. So taxes have gone up. And the point is that government continues to take more out of our pocket. And the question is, have we gotten any closer? Or are we halfway yet to achieving our Horizon 2030 targets? Because we started in 2010. Do we have better democratic governance? Do we have education for development? Is our education impactful? Is it efficient? Because most of our kids we know come out at standard 6. So do we have a high demand for students coming out at standard 6?
Can I have you comment on one of the things that the Prime Minister said in his speech? He said, I therefore feel confident in saying that never before has there been such an extended period of fairness, balance, and stability in Belize's financial and economic affairs. What is your take on that?
That's one perspective. That's his perspective. If you look at it, our debt has never been so high. We're approaching $4 billion right now. Our reserves, not too long ago, we had the Prime Minister boasted of having almost $1 billion in reserves. I think it's down to $200 million right now. If you look at the last page of this book this statement that you decided to read, in the preparation of all of these numbers and everything, his statement ended like this. Natural disasters, hurricanes and flooding have not been factored into medium-term projections explicitly. Implicitly, the high frequency of hurricanes in Belize is always a factor to be reckoned with. So they know that there is a strong possibility we could be hit by a hurricane. Yet, in making these projections, we have no contingency for that. So we are one major storm, I believe.
From disaster.
Thank you. Right? Because we're going full steam ahead with borrowing, full steam ahead with spending, no plan for saving.
But we're being optimistic.
Huh? Oh, well.
But it could also be, well, I wouldn't say strategic, but we have seen in the past, Senator, and that's kind of one of the points I just wanted to ensure that we included, where a supplementary bill is brought in following the presentation of the budget. In other words, we say we'll need X amount of dollars to be able to do all these things, and then later on come back and say, well, we need some more.
Yes, that is, the law provides for emergency borrowing. But what this is saying is that we know we live in a hurricane-prone area.
Yeah.
Yes, we have NEMO. NEMO has a small budget, but I'm talking if we have look at what happened to several of the Caribbean islands.
Yeah.
You know, look at the disaster that they're in. We know we're going to be hit by a hurricane. Do we have a plan? Do we have savings? Are we setting money aside for this? No. We're borrowing full bore ahead. Right? And if, as you suggest, they will come back with supplementaries, as they always do, right? Because we never stay within the budget, then it means we're adding more debt and more out of your pocket, right? So the Belizean people will suffer from the impacts of a hurricane and then suffer from the borrowings that we have had to borrow because we're not safe to deal with that.
Senator, I don't want us to run out of time without talking about something which is dear to the Belizeans' heart, which is the judiciary. We have a long history of Chief Justices coming out. I remember Chief Justice Conte begging, can I please have some more, using the Oliver Twist statement. This year, there was a complaint that even though the Attorney General's Ministry, which is separate from the judiciary, has seen an increase of 2 million, that there's been a decrease in the judiciary. Judiciary are your judges, your magistrates, the people who are making decisions. And allow me to say this as well. The judiciary are the police. They are co-equal part of government. They police the politicians. They are the police of the politicians. And their budget has been cut. If you look at the line item as it relates to personal emoluments, good Senator, I actually see a decrease of almost $1 million. This, I join you in questioning because as somebody who is familiar with the justice system, I know that we're short of at least 1 or 2 judges. And I know we're definitely short of at least 2 to 3 magistrates. So I don't understand how that is, and maybe you can assist me there. And also, in the same breath, can you also assist me with the issue as to the complaints by members of the House in relation to consultancies and payment of persons? Even though we have a Solicitor General, I still see this parade of private attorneys, and they're not there for free. At one point in time, we had one attorney there who was $1,000 an hour. So when you look at contracts and consultancy, we see even though a cut in the judge's salary, well, the judges, what is assigned for judges' emoluments, we see an increase of contracts and consultancy. How can we justify this?
Well, you are in a much better position, that your industry, so to speak, to tell me that the judiciary needs less money.
Oh, no.
No, I can't make a case for them getting less money. You would have to make that case. You're the one that was trying to find all kind of reasons to justify what they did.
I'm trying.
I cannot.
Government has to be given the benefit of the doubt somehow. Have to be. We need them to get it right. So we need to be on government side.
But to get it right, we have to hold them accountable. And anyhow, I won't go there, because when you try and hold them accountable, you know, pronouncements are made. But, sorry, Marlene.
Go ahead.
But there are so many examples, for example, where we know we need certain things in this country. One of them is we need to get rid of all of them backlog of cases, etc.
Yes.
I mean, what is the saying that says justice delayed is justice denied?
Yeah.
So I mean, you know that as well as I do. Marlene, I wanted to bring up one last ministry.
Okay.
Just
because we are out of time.
Just to reinforce my point. Housing, I want to look at the Ministry of Housing.
Oh, yes.
They said that they spent $161,000 on home improvements, grants, and loans, and that they helped 3,069 people. You know how much that averages to? It averages to $52.79. That is the amount that you are averaging lending and giving for home improvement. What you could do with $52?
It's an error that I don't think they were. I think maybe they were trying
This
to
is
show
a ministry that only have 2 pages for report, man. Please. Look, one more thing about them,
a sheet of plywood is more than $52.
They said that they gave household grants and assistance for urgent and essential repairs to 1,600 people, and that the average value of the grant assistance was $500. So 1,600 times 500 are $800,000, right? But guess what? There's no allocation for that money in this ministry. So where did that money come from?
Yeah. You know,
So I'm saying,
we gotta round off the conversation now, and I understand
This is
very
a part
clearly
2, 3,
that
4.
these are
Errors.
questions that you are putting out that we cannot answer, nor can we ask you to answer. So what would you say to the Belizean public as they hear these things, scratch their head and say, okay, if it doesn't make sense?
well, again, let's go back to the basics. If we agree that we have a vision for development that includes people participation, democracy, that's what it means, right? By the people, for the people. We need to become involved. That's what we've been saying for a long time on this show. We need people to become involved. Why? We're paying for it out of our pockets. If we start taking care of these things, if we start demanding explanations and demanding better reporting, better oversight, we will benefit as a people. Instead of building on these projects that we don't know if we can justify the spending, if we're getting value for money, we could be building real houses for the poor, not lending $50 for home repairs, right? So
Okay.
these things impact us, and it's about time that we start getting more involved. I promised
Gotcha.
anybody that wanted a copy of the budget, I could send it to them electronically. They could get in touch with me. But it's an easy read, really and truly.
Well, we
Thank
hope.
you for this opportunity.
Well, I was going to say next year we hope that we're able to have this conversation before you present in the Senate, at least. I don't know about before the debate, but we appreciate you taking the time to put together this
Yes.
presentation for us today. Thank
Important.
you. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to representatives of the Coastal Zone Management Authority and Institute. Please stay tuned.